Yeah, yeah, it's a very
No, it's getting recorded here also, no?
Hello. Hello.
The recording is pressed there.
Okay, folks, welcome for the next Dilli Ki Yaadein talk in the series. A brief word of introduction about Dhruvo Chaudhuri. Dhruvo Chaudhuri has had a very illustrious career as a photojournalist. No wonder there's got a lot of photographs that we're going to see today. It spans over 6 decades from 1952 to 2012. That's like a period of time when the city of Delhi really changed. He started as a freelance photojournalist at the age of 18, working mainly for the Statesman from New Delhi and Kolkata. His illustrated features were also regularly published in the Illustrated Weekly of India, various foreign newspapers and magazines. He also worked as a teacher of photography in the School of Planning and Architecture for more than 10 years, then joined the Indian Institute of Mass Communication as a faculty member and retired there in 1998. Recently, Professor Chaudhary is teaching photography for visual communication as a visiting professor at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Now, about his photographs, they have been exhibited widely all over the world, and he has had one-man shows of his works in New Delhi, Kolkata as well as London.
And also now
in Mumbai. He is the author of 2 books. One is called Delhi Light, Shade and Shadows, and the other one called New Delhi Down the Decades. It is a picture of the making of the city, and the other photographs that you're going to see are even before the city was made. In fact, some of the things you're going to tell us today are the years before independence, when Kashmere Gate was an entirely different kind of place. So let me not take up your time any further and move on to welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful to authorities of Ambedkar universities, and particularly to Professor Chaudhary and Farah for calling me here. I love reacting with young people, and probably that is why, instead of becoming a full-time photojournalist, I stuck to my teaching job for almost 40 years. First in School of Town and Country Planning, which became School of Planning and Architecture, and then later on for 25 years, rather 25 years as a full-time professor, and then 5 years as a visiting faculty in Indian Institute. You have heard about Indian Institute of Mass Communication?
Yes, sir.
Now, I am honored that I have been called here, and gives me great pleasure. Now, before I proceed further, I would like to pay homage to someone, a great author who was a friend of my father. I met him in 1953 and met him last in 1998 when my second book was being written. I suppose you will understand who he is. He is the famous author, Mr. Dhruvo N. Shall we stand up just for a minute in his memory? he was more than an uncle. In 1953, when I had completed this book, Dilli Light Shade Shadows, and went to present him, he said, "Good, you leave it here, let me see what I do with it." And I hope you won't mind, because today's presentation will be a highly personal. So if you get fed up, or you think it's not, please ask me to shut up, and I'll gladly do so. Even if you get bored, just tell me. But I would like to. This is the brochure. Is about my Delhi book. And I never expected, you see, one thing is there, when I do your work, I never expected any result. As a matter of fact, most of the pictures which you will see, which has become rarity today, I never had any intention. And this had both pros and cons. Cons, I'll say, because I lost hundreds and hundreds of photographs through my carelessness or sheer vandalism of, I would not like to mention it, of the house I was occupying, the owner of the house. But still, whatever survived, some of them I have, I have brought over here, and what he wrote in Hindustan Times, if you'll allow me, I'll read it out to you. Few people are better equipped to write about dramatic change in Delhi's character than Dhruvo Chaudhuri, son of Nirad C Choudhuri. He came to Delhi in 1942 when his father rented a flat near Morigate. He never went to school but learned everything from his distinguished father. He took up photography as his profession, starting with a box camera before going in for more sophisticated instruments. He has recorded his impression of the Delhi that was, with beautiful photographs and lucidly written text in Delhi. Light Shade Shadows. I recommend this pictorial biography of Delhi that was and what it has become to all lovers of the city. Kushwan Singh, Hindustan Times, New Delhi, 26 November 2005. I was really stunned when I read this report. I never expected that he would write a piece like this. Having said that, you have heard that we came in 42. Excuse me. Do you know how old I am? Have you any idea? 81 plus. I'm not broadcasting, but sometimes I do forget things. Now, sorry. This is the building called Piano Building where we stayed next to Morigate. And this wall is the old Shaganabad wall, which was built originally by Shah Jahan, but during the war, so-called mutiny or war of independence, whatever you like, it was largely damaged, demolished and rebuilt by British people. Morigate was only a stone's throw from this place. But this yellow building roof was a great thing in our childhood. I was 9 years old, and when I left P&O building after getting married, that was in 1962. So I stayed for 20 years in this particular building. Now, when we went up on the roof and looked south, this is the view of Shahjahanabad. This picture was taken in the 50s, and you can see Jama Masjid. And of course, I don't know, for good 40 years, I haven't gone there or seen this view. I suppose there must be a lot of multi-story buildings and so on and so forth. Anyway, this is what we saw when we looked south. When we look north, this is the civil lines. This is the city wall. And have you seen the Morigate bus stop? I got lost today. You know, I was going around having sort of, if not bored, brought up in this locality. After coming here nearly 20 years, I got completely lost. For nearly half an hour or 40 minutes, I was going round and round. My driver was cursing me. आपको रास्ता पता नहीं है, ये नहीं है, वो नहीं है, इधर से यू टर्न लेना पड़ेगा, उधर से आप पहले जो भैया सर चुप तो करो. And the Morigate bus stop was here, and this place is, as I said, it is completely built in with, I don't know, some schools, maybe all kinds of hodgepodge. And can you believe that this is what the civil lines look like from? Now, this was my first non-personal photograph taken with a box camera, which was presented to me by my father. And this photograph was taken, though we came in 1942, there was, due to war, there was no films. So from 1946, there was a photo studio over here called Berry Studio. So they started selling films without a queue and all that. So with the first roll of film which I bought in 1946, I took this photograph in 1946, and I was only 13. And my camera, as I have said, was this.
What was the other picture of? Which area? Which stretch of the road is this?
This road?
Yes.
This is Alipur Road. Yes. It's what is called Shamnath Marg.
Lothian Road, is it the same one, the one in front of
Yes,
us?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, it came in, and this is the Rich Cinema.
That's Rich Cinema at the back.
Yes. And everything used to pass, traffic used to pass through it. It was not blocked up. Originally, the Kashmere Gate was a single arched, but when it was blown up, it was rebuilt by the British people, and they made it into twin arch. And through this traffic, we used to come out of Kashmere Gate. Even our buses, student special, etc., used to come out, and we went in, even on our cycles, through this. So this is the camera which I used till late 40s and early 50s. And you know how much it was worth? 5 rupees, 8 annas, 5 rupees, 50 paise. And yet, now this is a very interesting map which I found at the time of 1857. Now, this is Kashmere Gate. This is Mori Gate where we live. And do you know what this government college is? The building next door, which was at first Tarashiko's library. I'll show you. Then in 1803, when Lord Lake defeated the Marathas at Patpadagan, New Indraprastha state, and occupied, became the de facto ruler, if not de jure ruler of Delhi. He made Tarashiko's library into a residence. And Oktraloni stayed here, Metcalfe stayed here, and this cemetery, I believe, is still there. Nigambod Ghat is still there. This Kela Ghat gate, when we came here, was still there, but now it has been blocked up. And this is actually where we are standing. It became the first government college, actually for the Madrasa. And Skinner's house, which was of great importance, is here. Now, Skinner's house, Skinner's was an Eurasian mercenary with Marathas, and then he raised Skinner's horse and moved over and became one of the generals, important generals. But he had built a house called Skinner's Bungalow. And, sorry, before that, I'll show you another map, rather modern one. Now, Kashmere Gate is here. This Delhi College of Engineering is where we are standing. St. James's Church is here, and GPO is over here. And when I show you a photograph, you will see the old St. Stephen's College Hostel, which used to be called Allnut Hostel in our young days. And these two gates on this road are still there. I don't know in what condition they are, still. And you know, when this Tarashiko's library was taken over, it became, British converted it into a residence. And this is what this old residency looked like. Oktraloni stayed here, Sir Charles Metcalfe stayed here, and then Metcalfe, when he built the Metcalfe house, I'm sorry. This is the old Metcalfe house, which has become Defense Science Laboratory, and you can't go there. I did have a photograph when it was rebuilt in my young days, but it has now disappeared. But this is what Metcalfe's house looked like before it was burned down. And this is the, of course, all of you are familiar with this building, which was converted, and in my young days, it was actually a part of the polytechnic and also higher secondary school on the other side. Now, this is taken just in front of, believe me, can you recognize? Right below the St. James Church, this building is still there, and this is the Maitland House, and this is the Lothian Road. Yeah, I'll point it out. Yes. This cartman was standing early in the morning in front of the St. James's Church. This was at that time Polytechnic Hostel. I mean, rather tough hostel. Even C.S. Andrews stayed over here. And Maitland House in our young days was Principal's bungalow, one Mr. Sen, and it was called Maitland House. And the Polytechnic Hostel, which was originally of St. Stephen's, is at the back. And this is the Lothian Road leading up to as it was in 1954 or 55.
Is that building which you can see behind the cartman, the red NCC building?
Sorry?
The NCC building now, the red building.
Yes.
Red colored building.
Yes, it has become the NCC building.
So one of the corners opposite it.
This is unfortunately my old photograph of Skinner's bungalow had disappeared. I couldn't trace it. But because Skinner's bungalow, I went first to the college, Hindu college, when it was in Skinner's bungalow. So in 1951-52, intermediate, and though I had taken a full photograph, but that photograph had disappeared. So whatever I could do is to download it from internet and get. In our times, these domes had disappeared, but the building was very much like this. Principal's room was somewhere here. Our classrooms were largely upstairs and behind this. But I still have a surprise for you. When I went there in 2003 to start some photograph for my Delhi book, I found huge multi-story municipal building. And they won't let me in, they won't even let me in. Then I fought like a white cat. I said, what do you mean? I'm writing a book, I'm a journalist, here are my papers, so I want to go in. So I did go in, and I found part of Skinner's bungalow still intact. This was our assembly hall. It was open. Now it has been boarded up. And this was an annexation. When I was studying, this wall will tell you, we had some girl students, quite a few, in pre-medical class. There used to be a pre-medical class. And also in graduation and all that. And this wall separated girls' common room from, and the staff room, faculty's room were here. So quite a few times, I don't mind saying, pretext of coming to see some of our professors who used to walk around, and some of them were very good friends with me, especially somebody called Amy Ethelbrecht, who became a doctor and imperative. Oh, I forgot, sorry. This building is of great interest. It is the roof of one of the, probably the richest Lala Sultan Singh of Delhi. His bungalow was just behind Hindu College. And even now, you can see the roof. And it is a large garden. And we used to hear from college, and also there is a lane down below which opened into the gate of Lala Sultan Singh. There was a big board, and we used to hear peacocks, and sometimes from the roof we would see barking deers and other things grazing in Lala Sultan Singh's bungalow. It was difficult for us, the youngsters. I was about 18, 17, 18, to enter, say, and take photographs over there. But one day we saw a curious sight. The gate was open, and one of the deers had escaped from the garden, and 3 khaki-liveried darwans or chowkidars, they were running after the deer, and finally the deer took a turn and entered Hindu College with me running behind. See, and I shut the door so that, and those chowkidars really thanked me, said, "तुमने तो बहुत अच्छा किया, नहीं तो इसको पकड़ लेना." And they were really danger. Anyway, this is the foundation. Right in front was the old St. Stephen's College, which has become the Election Commission office. There also, even few years back, I couldn't take a photograph of that building, but somehow I sneaked in a little earlier and had taken this foundation stone, which I found when I was preparing this. I hope you are not bored.
Very far from it.
Now, I deliberately did not choose a full picture of St. James's Church. You see it every day. But what was very important in those days, the parish, Cambridge Mission, and especially Father Jan Wetterall, who was the vicar, who was a friend of the family, and he allowed me a number of times to attend the church services in St. James's, because I am very fond of Bach and other organ music. And also I have great reverence for all the religions. All the religions. What I'm seeing today does make me very sad. Anyway, so what was very important was morning and evening, scrupulously, the sweeper would come and he would sweep the gate, and everything was spick and span, which unfortunately is no longer possible. So that is why I chose this photograph of mine, which I took one early in the morning. Now, going over to the Morigate side, there used to be, just outside Morigate, a number of circles, and this circle in front of Morigate had a statue here of one of the engineer generals called Alexander Taylor. Of course, when I took this photograph in the 50s, it was removed, but the roads and other things were so good and quiet that even the elephants rambled on, and as you see, you can see only the back tire of an old. Now, as you walk down the Nicholson Road from Morigate. Even now, I had to pass this building and walk, though it is in a very dilapidated condition. In those days, a lot of milkmen used to stay, and these small bricks will tell you that this building, which is still standing, at that time was about 200 years old. This picture was taken, I think, sometime in 1953-54, just before Nicholson Road joins Kashmere. And if you go towards the back side, there were a number of very interesting old bungalows, which were some of the hotels. One hotel, of course, this is not Apollo Hotel, but the buildings were essentially like this. This was also a hotel once. It was called Woodland Hotel. Sorry?
Woodland.
Woodland. It was, when I went there, I think around 203 to take photographs for my book. The present day owner practically chased me out with a stick. But I said, why are you taking the photograph? I said, I am standing on the road. Anybody can take the photograph. And I am glad that, I said, please, I'll take out your film. I said, do try, and I'll see what happens. So anyway, we walked away instead of, and I'm glad that you don't see such buildings nowadays. Very few. This is what Morigate looked like, not in the olden times, but once again in 2003. And the most interesting thing, you see, Morigate, the gate was demolished long time back, but still these walls are standing. And the most interesting thing was this old building, which had many Muslim occupants. And some of the girls started going to school and colleges in 42 and all that in Indraprastha College. And that bus was a fully Parda bus. I mean, they entered from the back. It was all with wire mesh. And one day, I have not seen such a bus in Calcutta. It was just after coming from Calcutta towards the end of 42. And there was a shop called Mullaji's, which used to sell all kinds of provisions, including bread and butter, and I was often sent over there. So one early morning, I was standing there looking at the bus. Two of the girls came out in burqa, and just before entering the bus, one of them threw back the visa, looked at me, and said, and jumped into the bus. So I was really flabbergasted, and I ran up to my house, over here. But unfortunately for me, my mother was standing in the veranda and I see. So when I raised up, she said, "What are you doing there?" I said, "I was looking at the bus." "You were looking at the bus? Didn't you see how that girl made fun of you?" I never forget that episode. This is taken much later, but the wall has become sad to see. Even today when I was passing this, it really saddened me. Nicholson Road was one of the cleanest and spick and span road till 1947. And on Nicholson Road, some of the buildings were like this. This, I don't know if it is there, it was actually a municipal maternity hospital. But most of the buildings, the next one belonging to a Bengali municipal engineer, Mr. Dasgupta, whose son was much older than me, who became one of the first Indian pilots of Indian Airline or Air India. I used to call him Gurvinda. Their house was also exactly like this. Now it is still standing. It's relatively a modern photograph. But what you may be interested in is this Bengali club. Originally, it's the heritage, which has become a heritage building, and I believe it was damaged. But originally, it was a guard house. The officers of the guard, after 1858, it was built. He used to stay there to keep a watch. And this Burma leather shop, the owner, about 2 weeks back, rang me up and said, "Do you have some photographs and so and so forth?" Yes, I have. And he says, "Can I see them? I want to." I said, "What for?" So I didn't take it. Anyway, this was actually the police station. And you see the back of the Kashmere. This is how the Kashmiri Gate Bastion and metro is related as it is happening here. Then this is the corner, and this was Shahjahanabad's one of the oldest cinema, showing only English films. Then they moved over to Hindi. Then when I took these photographs, they were showing really sleazy films. So I couldn't help. But the buildings were large, it had become lodgings and other things. But the very interesting thing was, if you went inside this lane in the olden times, you could see number of old havelis. I think they have been demolished and rebuilt now. And when you went in, there was waiter around the courtyard. And the next picture was, of course, taken in Bazar Sitaram. Unfortunately, and usually you saw a typical scene till early 50s when you entered one of these havelis. I had entered quite a few. This was in Ucha Patiram in Sitaram Bazaar. Then I had gone inside Lala Chunlamal's haveli also, and quite a few. I used to roam around and,
What are they playing, sir? Chess?
Sorry?
Was that chess or something else?
Yes, they were playing chess. They were playing chess, and had it not been for the statue of Mahatma Gandhi, it could have been, and it is one of my very successful old photographs taken in 1953. 53. Can you recognize it? This is Kashmiri Gate, where you take a turn. And these demolished flat, these 3 doors, in my young days, our dentist, Dr. Avinash Nair, and his French wife used to stay over here. And I don't remember, I used to hate going up to getting my teeth treated or pulled out and filled in and all that. But unfortunately, it collapsed, and I don't know if it. And oh, I have to tell you one thing. When you go inside and take a turn into the church road, it was the first Bengali boys high school at that time. Later it became higher secondary and shifted to Shamnath One. This is again Carlton. When I took this photograph much later, was a very famous restaurant and bar, mainly with all kinds of British soldiers or Anglo-Indian soldiers and all that. Central Bank was Spencer's, and this side there was a very interesting shop called Dilli Gun House. No, sorry, I'll show you. These offices of the British people, like Lipton, they were also in Kashmere. And this is the shop, Dilli Gun House, where at the moment a central bunk just next to it. It is in a real ramshackle condition, even when I took this photograph. Of course, now this shop has disappeared. Actually, my youngest brother bought his first air gun from this particular shop. This is the first photograph of reconstructed taken by Lala Dindayal, famous photographer, great photographer. So I could find it and I thought I'll show it to you. This is taken from outside, and we can come out of Kashmiri Gate, and this park I think has completely disappeared. But when I went there in I think 2001 or 2, metro was being built, and this park was called Nicholson Park. It had a beautiful avenue of these palm trees, and where from the spot where I took this photograph, there was a very interesting statue of Brigadier General Nicholson. I took it with box camera in 1946, and I don't think the photograph of Nicholson's statue has become really, I have searched all over internet, I couldn't find a single good photograph. So probably my photograph is the only surviving one of Brigadier General Nicholson. It was removed in the 50s to Coronation Park, and I believe it was later sold off to someone in Ireland. In front of Nicholson Park, it is still there. I believe it has been restored, hopefully. But at that time, it was in a sad state of affair. But when you went in, this is again a 1949 photograph with my box camera. The place was extremely calm and quiet and full of trees. And next to it was the tombstone of General Nicholson. And of course, now metro is rolling overhead. Again, same shot with metro. running over there. Can you see it clearly? Unfortunately, I apologize. They were all taken with my box camera. This is what Jamuna looked like. I'll read out the caption. Jamuna, 1947. This is my youngest brother, Dr. N Chaudhuri, who is a very eminent economic historian. He is brother next to me. This is what number 9 bus looked like. It used to start, and one of the special number 9 bus was our student special. And as you see in my scribble handwriting, the picture was taken in 1948. This is the garden gate, old gate Tulsia Bagh, 1947. I included it because, and this is what Okhla looked like in 1948. Then one day I took the entire palindrome rather quietly from the McDonald of Metro Rail, because normally they don't frown upon Canada. But I just couldn't resist the entire panorama which is shown. And as you look there, of course, you are familiar with it. This is the old Darashiko's library. And the only school I went to for few weeks, about once or twice a week, was here. In my time, this was a higher secondary school attached to Dilli Polytechnic. Since 2 of my teachers, science and mathematics, were from this school, the principal, Mr. Sen, allowed me very kindly, since I was a private student, to go once, a couple of times and do my science practicals, and also take lessons from my science teachers. And of course, next to it was, this was largely at that time. But in front of it was one of the oldest motor car shop of ESPRL and Company. And in my large set of old newspapers, I found this advertisement, Chevrolet, actually world's greatest car value. And look at the price, 2,900. I think you can't even get a tire to it. And if you went in, and another sad thing, just next to Pyarelal was the biggest bookshop in front of this thing, Atmaram and Sons. And after doing my practicals and other things, or whenever I came to Kashmere, I used to walk in to Atmaram. Since there was, frankly speaking, not enough money to buy books of my interest, that is photography and electronics, because I was an avid amateur radio builder. And I have a minute and tell you this story. In 1940, end of 1940, we didn't have a radio set. And at that time, due to many things, it was impossible to go to, my father would send me to a neighbor's house and say, listen to the news and report to me. Though he worked in All India Radio, he won't have a radio in. So I decided to build one crystal set with headphones. So I knew that they were available in Jama Masjid area kabaddi shops, or the old thing shop. But how to go there? It was just after, partition, but it had quietened down. So fortunately, one of our friends going away from Delhi had presented me with a sherwani. So I put on that sherwani, took 10 rupees from my mother and walked into that old shop old Kabari Bazaar underneath there. And after many days of trial and error and what I read in Atmaram, standing in Atmaram shop, circuits and other things, I built my radio set. Music came in, the famous AIR theme music. Then, in January 1948, one evening, they used to relay Mahatma Gandhi's prayer lectures. And I used to listen to them. I mean, whenever I was free, I would put on the headphone and go. There was no sound. I said, what is this? Has something gone wrong? Twisted here, twisted there, twisted there. There was hissing and crackling. Suddenly I heard in English, we regret to say, Mohan Chand Karamchand Gandhi has been shot dead. A little while ago in Birla House. I pushed the headphone in and I said, what is this? 3 times the message was reported. Then I took off my headphone, ran to my father and mother and said, do you know what has happened? Nobody knew in our locality. I heard that I have written it in this book. And then of course, all of you know. Anyway. There used to be in front of what is the municipal building a very interesting tower called Clock Tower. It was built by the British people in the late 19th century, I think around 1867, 68, something like that. But the best thing about it is that from our roof one day, while preparing for matric examination in month of February, I saw the top part of this tower falling down. There was a big rumble, and then this top of the tower which we used to see just disappeared. I said, what happened? I couldn't go next day after appearing for my matric paper. I rushed there and found this had collapsed and it had killed 3 people. And then, of course, behind Jama Masjid and in front of Clock Tower, we used to have trams. This statue of King Edward VII was just in front of Jama Masjid. It was later removed, made into a Subhash Bose's statue, and it was called Subhash Park. Now I believe even that has been removed and a metro station is being built. And it was King George V, 2 days before the coronation, had unveiled this statue. This has also gone. Now, all of you will recognize what Lahore Gate looked like, Red Fort, till late 50s. So shall we go inside Red Fort? Shall we? And see what it is like? I think. Oh, sorry. This is a photograph I took in 1955, one of my earliest color photographs. And these 3 girls from Miranda House were my great friends. There used to be a lot of rivalry because myself and another called Nimai Majumdar, both of us were in chemistry, and people from St. Stephen's never liked us. As a matter of fact, there used to be a verbal battles frequently, and sometimes it almost reached a fist pump. I said, do what? But we remained very good friends till end of 55. See, then we, after the convocation end of 55, we went our way. She Bengali, Nepali, she Lolita, and she Shata. Then 50 years later, at the launch of this book, this elderly lady walked up to me and said, Dhruvo, do you recognize me? At a moment I was taken aback. I said, yes, and I am Nepali. I said, what? Can you imagine? Then I said, why have you disappeared? I said, she said, many colleagues. I had become a principal. I had been to Jaipur. I said, where do you live now? She said, Faridabad. And we had shifted to Faridabad just a few days, a week or two back. I said, Faridabad. She said, yes, 21A. I said, good gracious. We live just in front of 21C in 46. And ever since then, of course, we keep on meeting. Her husband died here. That is what is life. I hope you won't mind telling you. And then Jamuna in those days flowed just like this, which is unimaginable. Can I see some?
There was one picture in the middle, just before the Jamuna picture.
Oh. Sorry.
Is that love
Can you
breakup?
recognize myself in 1962? I had bought a Labrador scooter in 1960, and I used to go down quite a lot. It gave me the mobility, and I thought once I was also young.
Any questions, anybody?
I hope this is what I have to say. Healthy is no, not yet. But I don't regret it. You see, many people say that I think someday or the other Delhi will regain, not in the same form, that is not possible, but in some form or the other Delhi will regain. And even till now, it's unfortunate, it has become very unsafe, it has become very difficult, expensive, and all that sort of thing. But still, it's a good city, and changes will always come. You can't do anything about it. I mean, you will be. What is that little camera of mine? Many people ask me that, do you like digital cameras or film cameras? Till late, early this century, I was using always film cameras. And most of the photographs which you see were taken with film cameras. But I realized, just as in 1969, for the first time, I taught while writing this Delhi book, I taught myself how to use a computer. I was 69 at that time. Because though many of my contemporaries and other authors, very well-known authors, they said, "No, we don't want computers." I knew that I will be left behind if I don't learn. But thanks to all your good wishes and what you have seen, now I can even make up. Not particularly good, I am saying, but still adequate PowerPoint presentation. It takes a lot of hard work, and you top of your life. Though I have a very good large consumer camera, digital camera, but now that I am gaining in years, most of the time I find I don't have the strength. In between, for about 20 years, I was an avid wildlife photographer and used nothing less than 200, 300, 400, 500 millimeter lens. But I can no longer do so now. So one day I went to Palika Bazaar and I wanted to pick up, even instead of that heavy prosumer camera, a very light camera. And this is the camera I picked up from one of the second-hand shops in Palika Bazaar for 1,500 rupees. It was working reasonably, I had to put it right. But one day, my doggy, my daughter's doggy, Beans, we saw Beans. Beans picked it up from my table and played with it and smashed it up. So I had to repair the entire battery thing, and for first few months I had to put a rubber band around this thing. And yet, it is the first, whenever I want to use a camera, even today, while passing some of those old things, I can use, and it has one, and many of my photographs that we took on the internet, exhibited. So change has to, we have to accept change. There is no way we can.
I mean, I for myself would be very curious to know what this campus looked like when you came for your classes to the Darashiko Library building.
Only this building was there, that was there, and the stone building, your main university stone building was there. Even this building was there. Because you can see from the arches and other things. Otherwise, it was a large garden space, and on the back side, I don't know, was with asbestos roof, other side of Madrasa Road, was the architecture department, which was later amalgamated. It was part of Delhi Polytechnic. Some of my friends studied there, and it was very open.
Did it have as many buildings as it has now?
You could count them on fingers. The total space between Kashmere Gate and this was largely open. We used to have Durga Puja. First Kashmere Gate Durga Puja. Earlier it was in Fatehpuri, then it shifted to this higher secondary school, Nirad C Choudhuri Original Library. And then now I believe it has shifted to civil rights.
The school there.
Bengali school.
Bengali school there.
Anybody else? Any questions about this part of town that somebody may have seen when
I
he have
just,
it?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, I teach at IP college actually, so I was very amused and curious about the story that you narrated about Indraprastha College. About the bus. It's a great story. I just want you to say if you remember something more about the college.
Yes.
IP college.
Yes, because that girl Sharda used to study in Dhruva college. It was slightly conservative college.
Okay. Compared to Miranda House.
Compared to Miranda House. But
Okay.
compared to today, so in my book I wrote, on the day I completed 70, 2003, I took a sort of nostalgic tour around New Delhi and Old Delhi. And I went out to the Delhi. You see, the civil lines, of course, I wanted to include, but I thought that too much, it will become too much. Civil lines was an extremely interesting area. Very, very interesting area. We used to go up on the ridge on Pirgaev. Then the Ranto Castle was still intact. Radiance Hotel, which is still stand, is there. Then when we went in, Chief Commissioner's house now, Governor's house, that was there. Then we were very close to Cambridge Mission. Now, as far as Indraprastha College is concerned, we couldn't see inside. It was all view. So, as I was telling you, when I was taking my three-wheelers, went to Mount Road and before Old Secretariat and came over there. And before Indraprastha College, I saw, don't mind, I really admire you wearing jeans. See, I myself wear jeans even till this age. So, I saw three girls coming out in jeans. And I really liked it. And thought to myself that if you did not wear a sari, and that too in a more or less conservative color, because I had to convince Sharda to wear that Kanjivaram sari just because of my photograph. They won't be allowed inside the college. And of course, Professor Narayani Gupta, who is really my history teacher and my mentor, I am very grateful to her for not only writing the cover pages, but really encouraging me to complete this book. And I think it was the day before yesterday, when I SMS'd her that I am coming over here, she was very, very pleased. And she said, you do deserve it to go and talk about your experience. So I'm very grateful to her. We have good friends. And I have some.
Narayani taught in the press
For a long time.
time.
For a long time. Before she went to Jammu.
Yes. She studied there also.
Yes. Achha, I want to say one thing. On the 7th, that is, on the 5th, please correct me, 5th, Saturday, 7 o'clock, in India Habitat Center, probably Gulmohar, it's a large hall, one photography group called Photographing the Historical Monuments. You know, it's a very and they are convener or the president or secretary, probably all rolled in one, has invited me to speak on my Delhi, New Delhi. And apart from what you see, this book, I start with my first photograph, which I took in Rashtrapati Bhavan, 1952, when I was doing a series of articles for the Statesman. Acropolis of Delhi, the town that Lutyens built, and where India's president lived. One Englishman called P.W.J. Crossland, who was a magazine editor in Calcutta, the Statesman magazine editor. I just sent a proposal. My first feature was published, and then I wrote to him. He said, yes, please. So to do that, and at that time one could just walk in and walk out, unless you wanted to go right inside. There was no restrictions. I brought my bicycle, got down from there, told the sentry that I am going up. I went up and took this photograph in 1952, which was published. And in this book, 60 years later, I took Rashtrapati Bhavan once again during change of guards in December 2012. So probably, I don't know, it may be, so I'll be sharing some of these pictures and experiences I had in photographing this. Delhi has really made me or whatever I am.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
It was very fascinating to hear the account.
Thank you very much.
We were really curious to know if you can share some of your experiences of partition. In Delhi, yeah, in this area.
It's a very difficult question, my dear. I hope you don't mind. I will try.
Okay. Yeah.
I wouldn't like to. Sorry, forgive me. What I saw, even today, when I hear about riots, and what I saw with my own eyes, please forgive me. Please forgive me. I had first-hand knowledge.
I should apologize for that.
I had first-hand knowledge. You can't imagine how men can be so cruel. And what I saw at the age of 14, particularly how the women were tortured. Excuse me. People call me a feminist, people call me a womanizer, my colleagues and other people. But I say whatever you like, it is all but natural. And I don't mind telling you, 5 years after marriage, when we learned we are getting a child, both my wife and I wanted a girl child, and we did get a daughter.
The Delhi that you described,
yes,
very few of us can actually imagine. But there is one part of it which I can relate to, and that is Carlton's. When I was growing up, my brother and I, our family used to attend St. James Church, and Carlton's treats were really special treats for us. On the weekends, my dad used to bring the chocolate bread or the sugar encrusted birds' eggs, and the cold coffee was very famous.
Yes.
I mean, that's the only thing that I can relate to. Delhi has changed so much from what you've shown us.
Normally, I did not go during the wartime and my young years. We never went inside the Carlton. But in the 50s, after I started working and also had a few friends and all that, we once in a while we used to go. But quite often, as you say, we used to buy these cakes, pastries and other things. That was the only place where we did. And of course, you know, the owner of the garden, I think, is a very famous actor.
Really?
Yes. I forget his name. He acted in that, I think, Hum Log and...
Nagpal, no?
Huh?
What Nagpal?
Vinod Nag.
Vinod Nag.
Ah, sorry.
Who played
My
Bashishar
memory
Nag.
has become very Vinod Nag. We knew him. And there is another one called Kukrela. You used to be our neighbor. So, yes.
Can I ask you a question? Thank you for your...
Can I come near? Because
I can come toward you, it's easier.
I'm slightly hard of hearing.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. I'm very interested
And you,
in...
listening patient to this old phobia.
Pleasure.
I'm interested in cinema history, so I liked your pictures of the Ritz, right? And I was shocked by the sleazy white woman who was from that era. So that
What
was
can I do? I can't pick out you.
deeply disturbing. But I'm also interested, there's another cinema back here called Minerva.
Right.
Minerva Cinema.
Yes, yes.
When did that come up? And
Oh, it is the one of the oldest one.
is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about that cinema hall?
No. Because I'll tell you. Going, let alone a Hindi cinema, even going into a cinema house was a big no about my father. First film which I saw one of the first films which I saw in Greece after coming to Delhi was Disney's Fantasia. And in Odeon I saw a documentary, Victory Through Air Power. And then 1948-49, when Laurence Olivier produced and acted in Hamlet. I suppose you have seen that film, Hamlet. I could get permission, and luckily with some another gentleman who was a friend of our family and his wife, Rekha, took me to see Hamlet in Reader. And
What was the reason?
of course, it was fascinating. We had read part of the classics, but after seeing Laurence Olivier's Hamlet on screen for 4 or 5 nights, I could not sleep. And I remember that couple had taken me to a quality. It was only an ice cream parlor at that time. And I had my first Tutti Frutti ice cream over there. But this is the irony of the thing. When our group dispersed, for the first time, we decided that all of us, 5 of us, will go and celebrate our party with a cinema. And that was a very romantic film, I don't know whether, about Rome. 3 coins in the fountain.
Trevi Fountain.
Trevi Fountain. 3 coins in the fountain. Oh, it was wonderful. And then the irony is that when I entered Indian Institute of Mass Communication, within 3 years, as a teacher of visual communication, as a lecturer first, then a reader, and then a professor, associate professor, because I have only a BSc degree, I didn't have a postgraduate diploma, so they didn't make me a full-fledged professor, but I was HOD and all that. I'm still called professor. And I taught film as a medium of communication, and particularly history of films, film appreciation. And I started with Tolkien's mother, Eisenstein's Battleship Potemkin, and even the other day, one of my daughter's friends who had been to say, does your father still talk about Battleship Potemkin? But cinema house in Delhi, because largely we used to see these art cinemas in embassies and other places. Regal I used to go quite often. Regal revolving I used to go quite often with my wife. So, shall we call it a day?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much that you listened to this 81-year-old man so patiently, but I hope you were not disappointed.
Not at all.
Enjoyed it.
Whatever little I could do, I tried to share.